This question, forgive me, is obvious, but it was the first question that the group that I saw the play with asked afterwards. And that is, how the hell does he remember all those lines? You're up there by yourself.
Don't you get that question when you're 25 too? Yeah. How do you learn all those lines? I don't know.
I mean, you're up there by yourself for an hour and a half. How do you remember all that?
Well, I'm 76. When I had a really good memory. I do not have a photographic memory. I've always had a good memory. And I've been doing this since I was 7, so it's a muscle, right? And you learn your lines and you have your own method. When I was 60, 16 years ago, I have friends who are actors. And I'd say, you come over for dinner, or we'll go out, or whatever, and they go, I'm doing an episode of whatever, and I've got 3 pages to learn for tomorrow, and there's no way. I've got 4 pages, or I've got 2 scenes, and I'd go, I wonder why they, well, I'm not gonna, I don't have that problem, thank God, Okay, I'll let it go. And then I got cast in a series called Warehouse 13 that I shot for 5 years here in Toronto for Sci-Fi. And I was the character that did facting. You know what that is now? It's called exposition stuff. Facting, I call it, instead of acting. I did a lot of acting, but it was facting. A lot of exposition was my character. And one day, the showrunner, Jack Kenny, wonderful man, came into the makeup trailer and said, I'm really sorry, the network blew up half this episode, and we got like 8 pages of monologue here. You don't have to do it over a month, over the next 3 weeks, a quarter of a page at a time, but you're gonna have to fix with exposition why we're changing it. I said, okay, all right. So he handed it to me, 6, 7, 8 pages, full monologue. And I said, okay. He said, well, we don't have to do anything today. Tomorrow or the next day, we'll do a little of it. Okay, all right, relax. And I was in my trailer, and they were 2 hours late with the shooting. And I came out 2 hours later, and I said, Jack, I think I could do the whole thing right now. And he said, what? You have a photographic memory. I said, no. How'd you do that? I said, honestly, I don't know. And he went, okay. And he tested me. He said, come here. And I had it pretty much down, and we shot all of it that day. About a year later, we were in Los Angeles, and my wife and I were at dinner, and there was some people I didn't know. And she told this story, and I said, it was funny, right? I have no idea. And there was a woman there, a middle-aged woman, who said, what are you doing differently? I said, nothing. Turned out she was a neurologist. And I said, I'm not doing anything. No, nothing. No, I'm not suddenly jogging. And Eleanor said, yes, you are. And she said, what is he doing differently? He said, he taught himself how to play classical piano about 10 years ago. And that's true. We moved into a house that had a grand piano. My daughter had been 10, around 10 years old at the time, and she wanted to take piano lessons, and there was a piano in the house. We bought the piano with the house, refurbished it, and she got piano lessons, and I called a friend of mine, and I played guitar, and I called a composer, a friend of mine, and I said, I think I want to take lessons, piano. He said, why? I said, I love classical solo piano. He said, well, you play guitar, right? I said, I can play a little classical guitar. I taught myself, but this is different. He said, it's a lot different. I said, so I'm going to get the piano teacher. He said, you don't need a teacher. I don't need a piano teacher? He said, no. It's not going to be like a Music Man. I'm going to think minuet in G and I'm going to play it. He said, Saul, find a slow piece of classical music and call me. The one you love. And I said, okay, I can tell you right now. He said, what? I said, I love Moonlight Sonata. And he said, well, that's perfect. I said, why? He said, you'll find out. He said, so here's what you do. Do you know how to read a bass clef? I said, no. He said, your daughter will show you. It'll take 5 minutes. Okay, you'll learn what the left hand does. It's what it is, how to read it. He said, Saul, you're never going to sight read. I said, what is that? He said, like, look at a piece of music that you've never seen before and start to play. That's 20,000 hours and, 8 hours a day for a number of years. I said, okay. And are you going to play in public? I said, are you kidding? No, it's just for me. I love it. He said, okay. So here's what you do, Saul. Memorize the first 2 bars with the right hand. I said, okay. It'll take you 20 minutes or less. It's very simple in Moonlight Sonata. Okay, I called him. I said, I got that now. He said, okay, now learn the left hand, the 2 bars. I said, yeah. Play them together. Not so easy. But, the left hand is mostly octaves. This finger and this finger, and that's it for that whole piece? He said, yeah, that's why it's perfect to start with. I said, okay. And then I said, okay, I've got 2 bars, left and right hand. What fingers do I use? I need a teacher. And he said, whatever comes easiest. I said, okay. And I said, now what? Do the next 2 bars, and then the next 2 bars. So what? He said, do it. So I had to memorize, because I can't sight read. I had to memorize all of Moonlight Sonata. He said, there's a downside. I said, what is it? Your family's going to learn to hate Moonlight Sonata. and until you get earphones and the right kind of piano. And within a month, I could play Moonlight Sonata. So the neurologist said, what you've done, and what do you play now? I was 61 at the time. I said, I play 25 pieces. I can play some Goldberg variations. I can play many of the nocturnes. I can play, Eric Satie. And he said, you memorize them. I have to. I can't sight read. And she said, what you've done for yourself over the last, when did you start? When you were 50? I said, yeah. I said, over the last 10 years, you have gotten rid of the Swiss cheese, or it's still there. That's what happens as you get older. But you've created synapses. You've created literally physical bridges that have enabled you to strengthen your memory. I'll bet it's better now than it was in your 20s. I said, it's a little better now than it was in my 20s. And that's how I could do it. Now you know.